The castle of Eldoria sat upon a cliff, its towers cutting jagged lines into the gray sky. Mist rolled over the cliffs like restless spirits, and the wind whispered through the battlements as if it carried the secrets of the centuries. Inside, King Aldrich walked alone through the halls of his fortress, his boots echoing on the polished stone floor. The late queen's portrait hung over the throne room, her eyes seeming to follow him wherever he went. Her absence was a cold weight upon his chest, one he could not shake, no matter how many days passed. The king had laughed once, long ago, when the idea of love had been simple. But now, after years of rule and sorrow, he had grown distant, his smile rarely touching his eyes. Nobles whispered that the king had become a shadow of himself, haunted by grief and memory. Some said he no longer trusted anyone, while others claimed he had grown cruel in his loneliness. And yet, beneath that hard shell, a spark remained, one he neither admitted nor fully understood. On this day, the grand hall was filled with the chatter of nobles and courtiers. Candlelight flickered against tapestries, casting dancing shadows on the walls. It was the first gathering since the mourning period had ended, and the air was thick with expectation. Among the crowd stood Seraphine, a young woman who had recently come to the castle as a minor courtier. She was not of noble blood, but her sharp mind and quiet courage had already drawn attention. Her dark hair framed a face that seemed ordinary at first glance, yet her eyes held a depth that few could ignore. The king entered the hall, his cloak trailing behind him. Conversation died instantly. Aldrich's presence was magnetic, a mixture of authority, power, and grief that made even the most confident noble bow their head. He did not greet the assembly with the warmth they expected. Instead, he fixed his gaze on Seraphine, who felt his eyes like a weight pressing against her chest. "You," he said, his voice low but carrying through the hall. "Come forward." Seraphine's heart beat faster. She obeyed, walking across the stone floor with measured steps. Whispers rippled through the crowd. What could the king want with her? Aldrich smiled then, but it was not a smile of kindness. It was playful, almost mocking. "I have a challenge for you," he said. He gestured toward a dress displayed on a mannequin, one that shimmered with an almost ethereal glow. The dress had belonged to the late queen, a relic of both beauty and mystery. Legend said it was enchanted, that it would reveal the true heart of anyone who wore it. The court gasped. No one had dared touch the queen's dress since her death. To even consider it was daring, and perhaps foolish. The king's eyes gleamed. "Fit in that dress," he said, "and I will make you my queen." Laughter rippled through the hall, some polite, some nervous. But Seraphine's gaze did not waver from the dress. She saw not just a garment, but a test. A question, perhaps, posed by fate itself. The nobles chuckled, expecting her to bow out. They thought her too small, too insignificant, too ordinary to accept such a challenge. But Seraphine did not hesitate. "I will wear it," she said quietly, yet with a confidence that silenced even the whispers of the court. The king's laughter rang out, echoing against the stone walls. "Bold," he said, "or perhaps foolish." A courtier stepped forward to help Seraphine, but the young woman waved him off. She wanted to do this on her own. Slowly, she stepped into the chamber where the dress awaited. The fabric shimmered in the candlelight, and the air seemed to hum with power as she lifted it from the mannequin. As Seraphine slipped into the gown, it felt alive, almost as if it were adjusting to her very being. The fabric clung to her in all the right places, yet moved with an elegance that seemed impossible. She caught her reflection in the mirror and gasped softly. It was more than a dress, it was a mirror of the soul. And in that reflection, she saw strength she had never truly acknowledged in herself. When she emerged, the hall fell silent. The nobles stared, their whispers replaced by stunned awe. The dress fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. Even King Aldrich's eyes widened, though he quickly masked it with a smirk. The laughter that had once bubbled from his lips faltered. "You fit it," he said, his voice unsteady. "Remarkable." A strange heat rose in his chest, a mixture of admiration and something more dangerous, something he did not fully understand. For the first time in months, he felt the stirrings of uncertainty, the tremors of a heart that had thought itself closed forever. Seraphine's hands rested lightly at her sides. She did not bow or curtsy, but stood tall, meeting the king's gaze steadily. "The dress chose no one," she said softly. "It fits those who dare to wear it." Aldrich's mouth opened, but no words came. The hall felt smaller now, the air heavier, as if the walls themselves leaned closer to witness what was happening. The shadows from the torches flickered, and the wind outside moaned against the stone, carrying whispers only they seemed to hear. Then, a soft rustle, almost like silk brushing against stone, echoed from the far end of the hall. The king's eyes flicked to the shadows. Something was moving, something unseen. He shook off the feeling and turned back to Seraphine, forcing a laugh. "Well, then," he said, "perhaps the challenge has been met sooner than I expected." The nobles murmured, trying to regain composure. Some smiled nervously. Some looked on with envy. And some, those who had always feared the king's unpredictable nature, simply held their breath. But Seraphine felt it too, the subtle pulse of something beyond the hall. Something that watched them from the darkness. It was not malevolent. Not yet. But it was aware. The castle itself seemed to recognize her, acknowledging her bravery, perhaps even her destiny. "Come," the king said abruptly, turning away. He gestured toward the inner chambers. "We shall see how far courage carries you." Seraphine followed, stepping past the shocked court. The corridors were long, lit by torchlight that cast long shadows on the walls. Every footstep echoed, a reminder of the silence that followed them. For a moment, neither spoke. The tension between them was not just of challenge, but of curiosity, and something deeper that neither dared name. Aldrich stopped before a tall, arched window. The wind whipped his cloak around him, and he looked down at the cliff below, where waves battered the rocks like relentless drums. "Many have come here seeking to please me," he said finally, his voice low. "They sought favors, power, or titles. You are different." Seraphine met his gaze, unflinching. "Perhaps," she said. "Or perhaps I only seek to understand what it means to be brave in the face of fear." The king tilted his head, studying her. Her words stirred something long, buried a memory of the queen, of laughter, of a time when love had been simple, not a weight. He had laughed at the challenge he gave her, expecting amusement. But now he felt a tremor of fear. Fear that he might lose control. Fear that his heart could be touched again. "You have spirit," he said finally, almost to himself. Seraphine raised an eyebrow. "And what danger is that, Your Majesty?" "The kind that changes everything," he whispered, as if speaking the words aloud could make them real. For a long moment, they stood in silence, two figures bound by challenge, fate, and something unspoken. Outside, the storm clouds gathered over Eldoria, their gray folds glowing faintly with distant lightning. The castle shivered, as if anticipating what was to come. Finally, Aldrich spoke. "You have passed the first test," he said. "But tests do not end with courage alone. There is much you do not know, about this castle, about its past, and about the shadows that linger in its halls." Seraphine's gaze hardened, her pulse quickening. The king smiled, a small, tight smile that did not reach his eyes. That night, Seraphine could not sleep. She lay in her chamber, the fabric of the dress still in her mind, still alive with the memory of how it had fit her perfectly. Outside, the wind howled around the towers, and somewhere deep within the castle, a shadow moved. It paused at her door, then vanished, leaving only the faint scent of something ancient and powerful. In the throne room, King Aldrich stared at the empty space where the dress had been displayed. He reached out, as if to touch it again, but his hand trembled. For the first time since the Queen's death, he felt fear not of enemies, not of rebellion, but of something far more dangerous, the stirrings of his own heart. And somewhere in the darkened corridors of Eldoria, a whisper of the past sighed, as if the castle itself had approved the union of courage and fate, though it had yet to reveal its final judgment. Cliffhanger. The storm outside Eldoria grew violent, lightning flashing over the cliff and thunder shaking the stone walls. In the deepest shadow of the castle, eyes glowed faintly, watching. The dress had chosen her, but the castle had yet to decide if she would survive the trials it had prepared. And King Aldrich, once certain in his laughter, now trembled, realizing that he might be the one unprepared for what was to come. The storm raged over Eldoria that night, winds battering the tall stone towers and lightning flashing across the blackened sky. Inside the castle, the echoes of thunder seemed almost alive, crawling along corridors and stairways like unseen spirits. Seraphine could not sleep. Even as she lay in her chamber, the memory of the dress and the weight of the king's gaze followed her, lingering like a distant drumbeat in her heart. The next morning, the sun rose over a drenched kingdom, painting the castle in pale gold and silver. Seraphine dressed simply, yet even her plain attire could not hide the presence she carried, one of purpose, courage, and now a quiet sense of power. The dress had revealed more than beauty. It had awakened a confidence within her, one she had never known existed. King Aldrich met her in the grand hall. He no longer laughed. The playful challenge of the night before had given way to a curious tension. He was the same man of authority, but something had changed in his gaze, a mix of respect, fascination, and unspoken fear. "Walk with me," he said, his tone commanding yet hesitant. Seraphine followed him through the winding corridors. The halls of Eldoria were ancient, lined with portraits of past rulers, tapestries depicting forgotten battles, and flickering torchlight that cast long shadows. As they walked, she noticed the subtle changes in the castle, the faint hum in the walls, the way shadows lingered longer than they should, and the whispered sounds that seemed to echo her footsteps. "You have unsettled the court," Aldrich said after a while, his eyes on the stone floor. "They do not understand what courage looks like. They believe loyalty can be bought with flattery or fear. But you," he paused, looking at her steadily, "you are different." Seraphine met his gaze. "And you, Your Majesty, are different too. You are not like the kings I have read about in books. You feel things others would not dare." He stopped at a window overlooking the cliffs. The waves crashed against the rocks below, white foam rising into the gray air. "Feelings," he said quietly, almost to himself, "are dangerous. They make kings weak, make men vulnerable. That is why I laughed last night, and why I tremble now." Seraphine stepped closer, drawn to the vulnerability she sensed beneath his regal mask. "Perhaps being strong is not about hiding feelings," she said softly. "Perhaps strength is in facing them, no matter how frightening they are." A flicker of something passed through the king's eyes, respect, wonder, and perhaps a shadow of longing. He said nothing, but the air between them seemed to shift, thick with unspoken words and tension that neither dared name. As days passed, Seraphine began to notice the castle's secrets. Doors that led nowhere, corridors that twisted in impossible ways, and whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. At night, shadows moved differently than during the day, curling and stretching in ways that suggested life. The dress, once a simple garment, now seemed to pulse with energy when she wore it, and she began to sense that it was connected to the castle, and perhaps to the king himself. Aldrich, too, noticed changes not just in the castle, but in himself. He had laughed at the challenge, believing it a trivial amusement. But Seraphine's courage, her calm presence, and the way she seemed to understand the castle in ways he could not, disturbed him. He found himself thinking of her often, imagining her in the quiet moments of the day, wondering what it meant to feel attraction, admiration, and fear all at once. One evening, as twilight fell over Eldoria, the king summoned Seraphine to the library, a vast room filled with ancient tomes and magical relics. The air was heavy with the scent of old paper and candle wax. Shadows danced along the walls, and the wind outside moaned like a restless spirit. "I have something to show you," Aldrich said, moving toward a tall cabinet. He pulled out a small, intricately carved box. "This belonged to my queen," he said, his voice soft, almost reverent. "It contains knowledge that the castle has guarded for centuries. Few have been allowed to see it, and fewer still have understood it." Seraphine's eyes widened. "And you want me to see it?" He nodded. "You have already proven courage beyond expectation. Now, I wish to see if your heart can face truths that are far older and far darker than any dress." Inside the box were scrolls and trinkets, each imbued with subtle enchantments. As Seraphine unrolled a scroll, the words glowed faintly, shifting and changing as if alive. The castle seemed to lean closer, listening, testing. The scrolls spoke of the ancient magic that protected the royal line, and of the curse that lingered over Eldoria, a warning that no ruler could claim true happiness without facing the darkness within their heart. Seraphine read aloud. And as she spoke, the shadows in the corners of the library deepened. Aldrich's hand rested on the edge of the table, his knuckles white. The words were old and dangerous, yet Seraphine spoke them with clarity, her voice unwavering. When the last words left her lips, a hush fell over the library. The shadows receded slightly, as if acknowledging her bravery. Aldrich looked at her with something like awe. "You are not afraid," he said. "That is what terrifies me the most." "Afraid of what?" she asked, her eyes searching his. "Afraid of what it means to care," he said. "Afraid that the castle, the dress, even I, will bind your heart in ways you cannot escape." Seraphine smiled faintly. "Then I will face it," she said. "If it is courage you seek, then I offer it freely. If it is danger, then I will meet it. But I will not run from what must be faced." The king's gaze softened, yet a storm lingered in his eyes. He wanted to reach for her, to touch her, yet he held back, knowing that such intimacy could awaken powers they were not ready to confront. Days turned into weeks. Seraphine's presence in the castle became both comforting and unnerving to Aldrich. She moved through the halls like a quiet force, unafraid of the shadows, unafraid of the whispers that haunted the castle. The nobles began to take notice, some with admiration, others with jealousy. But the true trial was not from the court, it was within the castle itself, and within the hearts of the two who walked its halls. One night, a message arrived, an urgent note carried by a trembling page. Strange occurrences had been reported in the northern wing of the castle. Servants spoke of lights that flickered without flame, of doors opening on their own, and of voices that whispered secrets meant only for the dead. Aldrich's brow furrowed, and he summoned Seraphine. "You must see this," he said. They moved quickly through the hallways, the storm outside a distant roar, until they reached the northern wing. The doors creaked open to reveal a room bathed in pale moonlight, shadows twisting unnaturally across the walls. In the center of the room stood a mirror, though it reflected not the room but a shifting vision of the past. The late queen walking through the halls, her face serene, yet her eyes haunted. Seraphine's breath caught. "It's magic," she whispered. "Ancient, powerful magic." Aldrich's hand rested lightly on her shoulder. "It is more than magic," he said. "It is a test. And I fear it has already begun. End is a test. End is a test. End is a test." The vision in the mirror shifted, showing the castle as it had been centuries ago, during a time of betrayal, love, and sacrifice. Seraphine saw rulers who had faced darkness, lovers torn apart, and the heavy weight of choices that had shaped the present. She realized that the castle did not merely guard the king, it tested anyone who dared approach the heart of Eldoria. As they watched, the shadow of the late queen appeared in the mirror, her gaze falling on Seraphine. It was neither kind nor cruel, but it weighed heavily, as if assessing, judging, and questioning her worth. Seraphine held her ground, feeling the pulse of courage and determination within her. The shadow moved closer. The air thickened. Aldrich stepped forward, his presence a shield against whatever force lingered. "You belong here," he said softly, though his voice trembled slightly. "I believe in you. Do not falter now." The vision dissolved suddenly, leaving the room in stillness. Only the echo of their breathing remained, and the distant rumble of thunder. Seraphine turned to the king, her heart racing. "It is testing us," she said. "Both of us. And it will not stop until we face the truth of our hearts." Aldrich nodded, his hand brushing against hers for a fleeting moment, sending a shiver down both their spines. "Then we will face it," he said, his voice firm, though his eyes betrayed fear, admiration, and something unspoken. Cliffhanger. That night, as lightning split the sky, a shadow detached itself from the castle walls, moving silently through the halls. Its eyes glowed faintly red, focused on Seraphine and the king. The castle itself seemed to hum in warning, as if whispering, "The trials have begun. Will your hearts survive the shadows? Or will they consume you both?" The storm over Eldoria had not ended. Lightning split the sky, thunder rattling the ancient stones of the castle. The wind's howl carried a strange sense of urgency, as if the very elements were aware of the trial that awaited Seraphine and King Aldrich. The castle's shadows stretched long and alive, moving across corridors, creeping along walls, and whispering secrets that had been buried for centuries. Seraphine awoke to the cold touch of dawn on her windowpane. She could feel the tension in the castle, a heavy weight that pressed on every heart within its walls. The dress she had worn during the first challenge hung by her chamber door, its faint shimmer seeming to pulse like a heartbeat. It had been more than a garment. It had been a key, a test, and now, it seemed, a warning. Aldrich found her in the hall, his cloak still damp from the storm, his expression a mixture of determination and unspoken fear. "The castle grows restless," he said. "The shadows are no longer whispers. They are moving, testing, seeking." His voice faltered for the briefest moment before he squared his shoulders. "We must face them together." Seraphine nodded. "I am ready," she said. "Whatever the castle demands, we will meet it, together." The king's hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch that carried the weight of years, grief, and the stirrings of a heart long closed. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke of trust, courage, and a bond that had begun in challenge, but was now tempered by something far deeper. They moved through the halls, torches casting flickering light across portraits of long-dead kings and queens. The air was thick with magic, and every step seemed to echo with the heartbeat of the castle itself. Shadows twisted unnaturally, forming shapes that were almost human, almost alive. Seraphine felt the dress pulse against her skin, and with it came clarity. The castle sought not only to test their courage, but the purity of their hearts. In the great hall, the final trial awaited. A mirror stood at the center, tall and ornate, but unlike any mirror they had seen before. Its surface rippled like water, reflecting not the present, but a mixture of past, present, and potential futures. As Seraphine and Aldrich stepped closer, the mirror shimmered and a vision appeared. The late queen, her eyes sad, her smile distant. Behind her, shadows formed figures of betrayal, ambition, and loss. "The final trial," Aldrich whispered. "We must face our truths. The castle will not allow false courage, nor hearts that hide fear." Seraphine drew in a steady breath. "Then we face it," she said. Her voice was calm, yet filled with determination. She took Aldrich's hand in hers, and he felt a tremor of emotion ripple through him. The warmth of her grip grounded him, anchoring him in a storm of uncertainty and fear. The mirror's reflection changed. It showed their lives intertwined, a tapestry of moments where courage, trust, and love intersected with shadow and sorrow. The visions revealed Aldrich's grief, his fear of loss, and the long years he had spent building walls around his heart. It revealed Seraphine's doubts, her fear of inadequacy, and her yearning for meaning beyond mere survival. As they watched, the shadows in the room began to move independently, twisting around them, forming shapes that whispered temptations, fears, and regrets. Aldrich's grip on Seraphine tightened. "Do not let them frighten you," he said. "We are stronger together." Seraphine's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "I am not afraid," she said. "Not with you." The shadows surged, a wave of darkness that sought to separate them, to test the bond they had forged. Yet, as they pressed against the shadows, the dress flared with a gentle light, shimmering like a heartbeat. The castle responded to their courage, its walls echoing with the hum of ancient magic, reinforcing their strength. Aldrich stepped forward, holding Seraphine close. "We face this as one," he said. "No shadow can divide us." The shadows recoiled at the unity of their hearts. The mirror shimmered, and the vision of the late queen softened. Her eyes, once stern and sorrowful, now glimmered with approval. A smile curved her lips, a silent acknowledgement that their courage, honesty, and trust had been proven true. The storm outside began to fade, lightning retreating behind the horizon. The castle seemed to exhale, the heavy tension lifting as if a burden had been removed. The shadows retreated to the corners, still present, but no longer threatening. Aldrich turned to Seraphine, his eyes filled with a mixture of awe and tenderness. "You have faced what I could not," he said softly. "You have faced not only the castle but me, and you did not falter. You have changed everything." Seraphine's lips curved in a small smile. "We changed it together," she said. "You were never alone in this." The king's hand brushed her cheek, a touch that spoke of unspoken love, trust, and a willingness to embrace what had once terrified him. "I have laughed. I have trembled. And now," his voice caught slightly, thick with emotion, "now, I know that my heart is no longer mine to hide. I offer it to you, Seraphine, if you will take it." Tears shimmered in Seraphine's eyes, not of fear, but of profound understanding. She took his hand, pressing it over her heart. "And I offer mine to you," she said, "not as a test, not as a challenge, but as a choice to face whatever comes, together." A soft glow filled the hall. The dress shimmered, and the mirror reflected not the past, but the present moment, the two of them standing united against shadow, fear, and sorrow. The castle itself seemed to pulse with life, acknowledging the triumph of courage, love, and trust. Aldrich guided her to the throne, the seat once heavy with loneliness, now a place of shared power and purpose. "You are my queen," he said, "not because of a dress, not because of challenge, but because of your heart. And I am no longer a king ruled by grief, but a man who dares to love again." Seraphine knelt briefly, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement, then rose to stand beside him. Together, they surveyed the great hall. No longer a place of judgment or fear, but a realm of possibility, courage, and partnership. Yet, even as peace settled over the castle, the wind outside whispered of distant storms. The castle, ancient and wise, had tested them, and they had passed. But the world beyond Eldoria's walls remained unpredictable. New challenges would come, and their hearts would be tested again. But for now, they stood together. Their bond forged in courage, tempered by love, and acknowledged by the castle itself. Aldrich turned to Seraphine, his hand brushing hers once more. "We have survived the shadows," he said. "And yet, I feel the castle has more to teach us. But no matter what comes, we face it together." Seraphine smiled, leaning into his strength. "Then we will meet the future as we have faced the present without fear and with trust." As they looked out over the cliffs, the sun broke through the receding storm clouds, painting the waves with gold and silver light. Eldoria, once a fortress of sorrow and shadows, now stood as a symbol of courage, love, and redemption. The kingdom would remember this day not for the laughter of a challenge, but for the hearts that dared to confront grief, face danger, and choose love. Cliffhanger, closing hint. Far beyond the horizon, a new shadow stirred, moving through the lands surrounding Eldoria. It watched the castle with unseen eyes, aware of the bond between the king and his queen. The trial of Eldoria may have ended, but the world beyond was vast, and destiny had more tests in store. For now, Aldrich and Seraphine stood united, ready to face whatever came next, together.